Fire. The east wing is afire. The cry tore Rafe, Duke of Lyndhall, from his chair before the echo had died, and the night that had been so still a moment ago broke into running feet and the smell of smoke. He was in the corridor in 3 strides, his guests spilling from the drawing-room behind him in a froth of silk and panic, and already an orange light pulsed at the far end of the gallery where the old wing met the new. "Out," he commanded, and his voice was the kind that men obeyed without thinking. "Everyone to the south lawn. Wake the servants. Buckets from the well." They went. They always went when he spoke, for the Duke of Lyndhall was a man feared as much as he was respected, a brooding figure who kept his own counsel and his own heart, and who had buried a wife 5 winters past and let no one near since. The hall emptied as if a tide had pulled it. He stood at the head of the great stair counting heads in the firelight, his mind running cold and quick over the house he had known since boyhood, every passage, every door. Lady Frampton sobbing into a manservant's coat, the Aldreds, old Colonel Hext with his stick, his sister Cassandra gripping the banister, her face white as bone. "Rafie," she gasped, "the smoke. It's spreading toward the nursery passages." "The family's all clear," he said, scanning the heads again. Footmen, maids streaming out the servants' door with their aprons over their mouths. The whole household turned out onto the gravel in their nightclothes, coughing, weeping, counting one another, and he stood among them like a stone in a river, and something in the count would not come right. He turned to the housekeeper. "Mrs. Pell, everyone is accounted for?" "Yes, Your Grace. That is," she faltered, her old face creasing. "Family and guests and staff, every soul I can see." And then he knew the way one knows a missing tooth by the tongue's reflex, the small wrong absence that the eye skips over. "Miss Nye," he said. Mrs. Pell blinked. "Your Grace?" "Bridget Nye, my cousin's girl, the governess." His jaw tightened. "Where is she?" There was a silence in which the fire could be heard, a low animal roar from the east wing, and not one face on that crowded lawn answered him. Not one of them had thought of her. She was the poor relation, the orphaned daughter of a distant Lyndhall cousin who had died in debt, taken in 3 years past to teach the steward's young charges their letters and their sums. She slept in the east wing, because no one had ever thought to give her better. She dined alone. She was the sort of person a house forgets it has, until the house is burning, and the head count is 1 short, and no one will meet the Duke's eye. "She has the small chamber above the schoolroom," Mrs. Pell whispered. "Your Grace, the stair to it. The fire came up through the old kitchen flue. It's all along that side." He was already moving. "Rafie," his sister screamed. "Rafe, you cannot." But he had thrown off his coat and torn the cravat from his throat, and he plunged the silk into the horse-trough by the door and pressed the sodden cloth to his mouth. And then he went back into his burning house, and the night swallowed him. The hall was a furnace breath. Heat pressed on him like a hand. The fine entry he had crossed 10,000 times had become a place of smoke and shifting light, the portraits of his fathers gazing down through a haze that thickened with every step. He went low, the way the old colonial stories of the peninsula had taught him, beneath the worst of the smoke, his eyes streaming, his lungs already burning behind the wet silk. The east wing. He knew the way blind, past the morning room, down the 3 worn steps, along the passage where the floor was older and the panelling drier, and here the air was a living orange and the crackle had become a thunder. A beam fell somewhere ahead in a gout of sparks. He did not stop. "Miss Nye," he roared into the smoke, and his voice came out cracked and small in all that noise. "Bridget." He had never once called her by her Christian name. He had barely spoken to her at all. A nod in a corridor, a brief word of thanks at quarter day, that single afternoon a year ago when he had come upon her in the library, sitting on the floor between the shelves with a book of his late wife's poetry open in her lap, and she had scrambled up scarlet with apology, and he had looked at her properly for the first time and seen that she had been weeping over the very lines that he himself could not read without his chest going tight. He had said nothing. He had taken the book and gone, but he had not forgotten the look of her, dignified even in her fright, the only soul in the house who seemed to grieve his wife as he did in silence, expecting nothing. He had told himself 100 sensible things in the year since, that a duke does not dwell upon his cousin's governess, that the warmth he felt when he passed her in the gallery, the small absurd lift of his spirits at the sound of her quiet voice teaching sums through an open schoolroom door, were nothing habits of an idle mind, signifying less than the dust on his late wife's piano. That a man who had locked his heart away after grief had no business unlocking it for a penniless girl with smoke-dark hair and a steadiness that shamed his own. He had told himself all of it, and believed none of it, and gone on as he walled, sealed, alone. Tonight the fire had burned every sensible thing to ash. There was only the truth left, plain as the flames, that of all the souls beneath his roof, she was the one he could not lose. He found the schoolroom stair. The lower steps were alight, the banister a ribbon of flame. Above, through the rolling smoke, a door. Bridget. A sound, thin, choked, but a sound, his name, or something near it from beyond that door. She was alive. He went up through the fire. He did not afterward remember the climb, only that he came to the top with his sleeve smoking and beat it out against the wall, and the door was hot under his hand, but it gave, and beyond it the little chamber was a box of smoke, low and bitter, and on the floor beneath the window, for she had had the wit to go low, the wit to soak a shawl and hold it to her face, the wit to wait rather than run blind into the burning stair, was Bridget Nye. She was on her knees. Her dark hair had come loose about a face streaked grey with smoke, and her eyes when they found him were enormous and disbelieving, as though the Duke of Lyndhall come for her through the fire was a thing too impossible to be real. "You came back," she said. Coughing racked her. "No one. I called and no one came." "I came." He was on his knees beside her, his arm already going round her. "I will always come. Can you stand?" "My ankle, the smoke, I fell on the stair before. I crawled back." "Then you needn't stand." He gathered her up against his chest as though she weighed nothing, one arm beneath her knees, one across her back, and her arms came up around his neck and locked there, her face turning into the curve of his throat, and he felt the whole of her trembling. "Hold to me. Don't let go. Whatever you hear, whatever you feel, don't let go of me." "I won't," she breathed against his skin. "I won't." The stair was worse than before. The flames had taken the upper banister now, and the smoke had dropped so low he could see nothing but a dull red murk, and he went down it by memory and by feel, counting the steps aloud against the roar, her arms a desperate band around his neck, his body curved over hers to take whatever fell. A timber crashed behind them as they reached the passage. He did not look back. He bore her low and fast through the morning room, his lungs screaming now, black spots swimming in the orange dark, and there at the end an impossible square of cool blue, the open door, the night, the stars. He carried her out into the air. The lawn rushed at them, voices, hands, his sister's cry, the bright wheeling chaos of the bucket line, but he saw none of it clearly. He bore her clear of the smoke and the heat to the edge of the gravel where the cool grass began, and there he sank to his knees still holding her, unwilling, it seemed, to set her down upon the earth where the world might take her from him again. The firelight washed over them both, fierce and gold, and her arms were still locked about his neck, and her smoke-streaked face was lifted to his, and neither of them, for a long moment, could do anything but breathe. "There," he said hoarsely. "There, you're safe. You came back for me," she whispered again, as if she could not make it true by any number of sayings. "I am nobody. I am the one everybody forgets. And you came back into the fire for me." Something broke open in his chest, then that had been shut for 5 long years. "You are not nobody," he said, and his voice was raw and low and meant for her alone. You are the only one in that house I could not leave. Someone brought a heavy coat, his own, rescued from the hall floor, and he wrapped it round her himself, drawing the wool close about her shoulders over the scorched and blackened hem of her plain nightgown, his hands not quite steady. Mrs. Pell came with water and weeping apologies. Cassandra flung her arms round them both. The fire raged and was fought, and at last, near dawn, was beaten, the east wing a smoking ruin, but the great house spared, and through all of it the Duke of Lyndhall did not leave Bridget Nye's side, not once, not for the steward nor the magistrate nor the grey morning light. They sat at last by the hearth in the undamaged library, the very room where he had found her with his wife's poetry year before, wrapped in blankets, the cold dawn pressing at the windows, a fire of their own kindling small and ordinary in the grate. The house slept around them, exhausted. She held a cup of broth in both hands and could not seem to stop looking at him, and he found he could not stop looking at her. "They didn't count me," she said softly into the quiet. "I heard you. On the lawn, I heard you ask and ask again, and no one answered. 3 years I have lived under this roof, and no one on that grass knew whether I lived or died." Her voice did not break. She said it the way she did everything, with that quiet dignity that had snared him a year ago and would not let him go. "But you knew. You felt the gap where I should have been." "I have felt it longer than tonight," he said. She looked up. For a moment he said nothing more, only watched the firelight move on her smoke-streaked face, and the words that had stayed locked in him for a year crowded up at once. He had rehearsed, in the long fight against the flames, all the reasons he must not speak, that she would think it gratitude, or the wild feeling of a near thing, that a man does not propose to a trembling woman on the night he has pulled her from a fire. But the reasons had burned away with everything else in that east wing. He had counted heads on the lawn and found the gap where she should have been, and in that single cold heartbeat he had understood the whole shape of his own heart, which had been hiding from him for 12 months behind 100 sensible excuses. "Do you know," he said slowly, "what I thought of going up that stair? Not the fire, not whether the timbers would hold." He turned his scorched hands over and looked at them. "I thought that I had passed you in the gallery 1,000 times and never once told you that the house was warmer for your being in it. That I had let 3 years go by saying nothing, because a duke is a coward in all the ways that matter, and I had decided it was wiser to feel nothing than to feel that, and lose it as I had lost before." His dark eyes came back to hers. "And I thought, if she dies in this fire, she will die never knowing she was seen. I could not bear it. I would have walked through worse than smoke to spare you that." "A year," he said, "since the library, since I saw you grieving for a woman the rest of the house had already forgotten, expecting nothing for it, asking nothing." He set down his cup. "I told myself a duke does not notice his cousin's governess. I told myself a great many sensible things. And then the house caught fire, and the only thought in my head, the only one, Bridget, was that I could not live in a world that had let you burn while it counted its silk and silver safe." Her eyes filled, the firelight trembled in them. "I have nothing," she said, "no name worth the speaking, no fortune, no. I am the poor relation. Society will say." "Society," said the Duke of Lyndhall, "may say what it likes. I have been a feared man and a cold one, and I have let society order my life for 5 years, and I tell you it has brought me nothing but an empty house and a heart kept under lock for no reason at all." He took the cup gently from her hands and set it aside, and he took both her hands in both of his, smoke-stained and scorched and trembling as they were, and he held them as a man holds something he means never to lose again. "I would not let them forget you ever again. I would put your name where the whole world must speak it. I would have you for my Duchess, Bridget Nye, not the one everyone forgot, but the one this house could not bear to lose. Will you have me?" For a moment she could not speak at all. "I called and called," she whispered, "and only you came." "And only I ever shall need to," he said. "I will come for you across any fire there is. To the end of my life, you have only to call, and I will already be running." She came into his arms then of her own accord, there before the small clean fire, and he held her as the dawn turned from grey to gold beyond the windows of the house that had nearly taken her and never would again. Outside, the embers of the east wing breathed their last into the morning. Inside, by the hearth, the Duke of Lyndhall pressed his lips to her smoke-dark hair, and thought that he had run back through fire for many things in his life, for honour, for duty, for the dead, but never once, until this night, for something he loved enough to be glad of the burning. "You forgot nothing," she said against his heart. "Of all the souls in the world, you remembered me." "My darling," he murmured, "I shall remember you every hour I am given, and count you first of all I have, until the very last of them. You were never forgotten, you were only waiting to be found."